Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Maggie, and I've been living in China for the last year. So today I kind of want to talk about some of the tips and tricks that I use as someone who does not speak Chinese, but living in China, and how I am able to navigate all of that relatively smoothly. So to give you a little bit of backstory about me and my history, I was adopted in China when I was 1 and then brought to the US, but I don't know the language whatsoever. And it was really during the pandemic when I felt the urge to reconnect with that heritage and come back to China. So around that time when I was making the plans on how to get there, I ultimately decided to go through the University of South Carolina and go back for my Master's of International Business, which they're very well known for. And they partner with Shanghai Xiaohongshu University. So I knew once I got into USC that the chances of me getting to SJTU was very high. So maybe 2 years before I actually get into USC, I started doing Duolingo. And so this lasted maybe 6 months. And I did a very simple language course at a local nonprofit called Upstate International. And we had Mandarin classes for about, I'd say 3 months, once a week. And I was doing Duolingo at the same time. But once I went to USC, I kind of just stopped everything. And I think even before that, it kind of just stopped. And for whatever reason, as I was preparing to get to China, something in me was just like, YOLO, like just wing it. And I didn't look back at any of the research I had done about China, refreshed the language, like nothing. And so the first day I landed in Shanghai, the only Chinese words I knew was essentially ni hao. Like literally that was it, which is interesting. And I think back at that first day and I'm like, I don't know how I got around so easily without that, but I will give a lot of credit to a friend who had a DD waiting for me and would call and communicate with them. And then I just had to get to the hotel and I was just like, sorry, I can't speak Chinese. And then they knew some English, I think. So yeah, after a year, I still really don't know much Chinese. So since then to now, I had to take a Chinese class for like a beginner Chinese class for 1 semester. Don't really remember most of it. So I think when it comes to going to China, the first thing that you need to know is that you really don't need Chinese. I feel like this is a country that is so well organized for the most part when it comes to Metro, Alipay, and WeChat. And just the people in general are so used to pulling out a translation device. Like, you know, if you look non-Chinese, like they usually know to pull out their phone immediately. And that has been such a blessing. And then if you meet some of the younger like people, they sometimes know a little bit of English. So if you're wanting any kind of phrases that will help you get around, the ones that I use literally all the time, 我不会说中文, which is I don't know Chinese. And that's essentially it. So, you know, when someone starts talking to me, sometimes like I can tell it's not something that I need to respond to. And like, it's just them being polite. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I just smile and nod and I keep going. But usually if you hear like the ma at the end, which I know that tone is probably wrong, it's usually a question and they're looking at you expectantly. And that's where I'm like, okay, 不好意思，我不会说中文. And when they look at me confused, I say 我是美国人, which means I'm American. And then sometimes I had to say 我听不懂, which means I don't understand. So literally that has gotten me through a year of living in China. But there are a few other steps and tricks and tips that I can share with you on how to get around. So when it comes to translating everyday things that are like signs or whatnot, I usually use Google Translate with a VPN on. So I personally use LetsVPN. It's worked decently well for me. And I've tried Astral, I tried Shadow Rocket, and I just prefer LetsVPN. And for just a typical trip to China, that should be fine. But it does have a limit of just 2 devices, so I have to have 2 different accounts, which is a little annoying, but that's the simple way of getting around. I am always a little hesitant about using Google Translate with a policeman, though, if I'm stopping and asking for help or directions or whatnot. So then I'll usually go into like the native Apple Translate app or into the Alipay, and there's a translate section where then I'll type it out and ask them. So one of my favorite tools for getting around China is ChatGPT. I do have the paid subscription, but I don't think that's necessary in the context of, you know, speaking Chinese. But if I am looking for something on Taobao, which is, you know, China's Amazon, and say it's like a tank top or whatnot, and I don't know the search term, I'll ask ChatGPT, hey, I'm searching on Taobao for X, Y, and Z. Can you give me the Chinese search terms I should use? I use ChatGPT if I'm looking for directions to a place. So maybe I know the name of a museum, but I don't know the address and I don't know it in Chinese, and I'm using like a map in the Chinese version. And so I'll ask ChatGPT and it'll give me usually it in Chinese. Or same with food of like, I'm looking for these kind of search terms to put into Dianping, or I want this kind of food and I put that in Meituan. So it has a lot of uses in terms of recognizing what the lingo would normally be for Chinese people, and then it'll give you usually multiple options that you can try if you're not getting what you want. The other AI alternative that makes a lot of sense is if you use Deepseek, which is China's version of ChatGPT, and obviously it's China, so they'll understand Chinese really well. So I sometimes use that as well, but for the most part, I usually use ChatGPT to help figure everything out. What's also really great is if you're wanting to get tickets to a museum or any kind of attraction, and it's probably a mini program in either Alipay or WeChat, I'll tell ChatGPT, hey, I would love to get to the Shanghai Museum, but I don't know how to get tickets. And sometimes it's not available on trip.com, it's not available on Klook, and you really have to purchase your tickets through a mini program. And so what I'll do is I'll ask ChatGPT, like, this is when I want to go. Can you help me find a potential name for what that mini program would be called so I can search it in WeChat and Alipay and then go through the same process. So once you're in Alipay or WeChat and you're in that mini program, both of the apps have some translation services. So in Alipay, it's usually like a little floating button that says translate. And this doesn't always work because it just depends on the way that that mini program is designed. And if it's graphics, that's more like just images that have text in it and was copied and pasted in there, sometimes it can't translate it that way. If it's text that was like actually written in code into the program, then it can translate. The same thing with WeChat is if you're in a mini program and you look at the top right, there's usually a circle, which means close the mini program. And next to it is an icon that's either a star, which is usually how it starts off when you first open the mini program. But if you wait like a few seconds, it'll usually change to 3 ellipses, and some of the menu options is translate the page. And so that's how I've gotten around understanding mini programs, understanding terms and conditions and whatnot. I think if you're trying to get a Meituan delivery, or if you have a phone call coming in from someone in China, I've set it up so my phone has an automatic response of, sorry, I can't speak Chinese, but if you message me, I can then use a translator to communicate. So that's one way if you're maybe living in China and that's an issue that you face ongoing, is to just set up one of those like quick time responses of when someone's calling and just, click the button and it sends it to them. This doesn't always work, especially if it's like a private number or the driver themselves can't get it. So like sometimes with Meituan, depending on the level of security, like they can't see that message, but I do have that copied and pasted in a notes app, then I'll copy into the Meituan message chat or the message chat or whatnot. So a very simple tip is to check that your apps are set to the English version. So apps like Didi, Amap, Alipay, WeChat, and 12306, all of these apps have an English version or setting, so to speak. So when you're typing things in, you can set it to the English version and it'll usually find the Chinese equivalency. And it's worth it to go through the extra steps of figuring out where the settings are so that you can get the right version. So when you're in China, it's like one less thing to worry about. Sometimes those features are a little different. So for example, the 12306 app for trains, the English version, you can still book all of your information, but you won't be able to pick specifically like the type of seat you want, like whether it's a window seat or an aisle seat or a middle seat, or see like the different stops along the way. And so I personally prefer the Chinese version for that, and I'm okay going through the process of translating. But for if you're just coming to travel quickly, it is a good idea to go ahead and switch. Don't underestimate the power of the in-app translations. So if you add someone on WeChat and they only speak Chinese and you speak English, if you click and hold on a message, there's usually an option that pops up of saying translate. And if you do this like 2 or 3 times to their messages, eventually it comes up with the option of, do you want to just auto translate whenever new messages come in? So that's really easy to be able to communicate with someone that you maybe have a longer relationship with, that you need to communicate with often. So, maybe you have a private driver that you need to talk with. Maybe you want to talk with the hotel concierge often. I do this for my hair stylist, and we just, we set up our appointments. We're at the appointment texting back and forth. And then I also have this for my like house cleaner or my apartment cleaners of, hey, we're coming over, or what do you need? Things like that. So that makes it a lot easier. And then there's other apps like Meituan and Dianping that have some level of in-app translation. It's not really usually the best, but there is some form of it. And Xiaohongshu is a fantastic app for figuring out routes and photo spots and whatnot. And they do have translations, like not settings, but an option at the bottom of a post that says like see translate or see translation, similar to how Instagram has if it's in a different language, that it'll translate it to your phone's native language. So definitely don't underestimate the power of those and how it can help you navigate China easier. So I think one of the most annoying things people can agree on is the sheer number of screenshots you'll have afterwards that you then have to upload to Google Translate. But I'd encourage you to look into some screen recorder apps that you can click a button and it can read off your screen and then just translate right in app, rather than you having to take a screenshot and then upload it to Google Translate. So I can't really remember how I did this with my iPhone, which I really wish I could, and I'll search and see if I can put some information in the description below. But I am able to use some of the functions, like the shortcut functions in Apple, where I click a button that's always on my screen and it'll sort of take a screenshot and then translate, but it never actually saves it to my camera roll. So I can still get the benefit of understanding what it's saying without having to clutter up my camera roll. That being said, this just shows what you can currently see. If you need to scroll on the page, you'd have to go through the whole process of like holding down the button and having it translate and reading it and whatnot. Where there are other screen readers where you just click the button and even as you're scrolling, it'll be live translating for you. So depending on whether you have an Apple or some other system, definitely check out your app store and see if there's options available. And maybe if you're only coming for a week, maybe they have a 1 week free trial or whatnot. Some people said, Screen Reader is one. Playco may have one. I'll try to put some in the description below, or if I end up making a blog post, attach it in there. But there are options out there. You just need to do some of your research on your own, but that will make your life a little bit easier and free up the space so that you can take all the beautiful photos and videos of your trip. So this video was all over the place, but I really hope that you were able to take away at least one good tip on how you can navigate China without knowing the language. Truly, it's not as daunting as it may seem, as long as you have these tools and tricks in your back pocket. And I really hope you enjoy your time in China. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a like and subscribe for more content like this. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks. Why is it possible to choke on air? Oh, like why? Why? Got some milk stuck in my throat. Okay, that's the tip. Okay. Have a great, wonderful day. That's great grammar. Great grammar. Okay.